this is Genesis Week.
This recent video was titled Are Created Birds? Let's pop along to the feeder and see what nuts Juby has to offer us.
According to the most widely accepted model of evolution, dinosaurs evolved from birds.
Ian misspoke, but corrected it in the video. But still, no, Ian. Birds no more evolved from dinosaurs than we evolved from chimpanzees. Modern cladistics, which groups animals based on shared and distinct physical characteristics, indicates that birds evolved among the theropods, a subgroup of the dinosaurs which share traits such as wishbones and hollow air-filled bones and include the well-known Velociraptor and T-Rex. This does not mean that velociraptors grew wings and flew, however good that might be for Jurassic Park 4. Since the 1990s, the fossil beds of China especially have been revealing evidence that many dinosaurs, mostly theropods, were indeed feathered to some extent. So amongst the dinosaurs were the theropods, and amongst the theropods were flying theropods, and amongst them some survived and evolved to become our modern birds. In the same way that mammals were around over 200 million years ago, birds were around over 160 million years ago. Neither were waiting for the dinosaurs to die out before poofing into existence. Juby then comments on a statement by the curator of paleontology at the American Museum of Natural History, Mark Norell.
Like Mark Norell, curator of paleontology, who said in the video, "Living birds are dinosaurs. Just like human beings are a kind of primate, birds are a kind of dinosaur." Now, statements like that are nothing more than a fine piece of propaganda.
Propaganda. Stupid boy. Propaganda is a form of communication aimed towards influencing the attitude of the community towards some cause or position by presenting only one side of an argument. So Ian, if I now catch you presenting only one side of an argument, your projection will be highlighted for all to see.
If you pay close attention, you'll notice they actually changed the definitions of birds and dinosaurs to make them one and the same.
Stupid boy. Birds and dinosaurs is a fine definition if you're planning an arc and want to keep your numbers down, but science tries to be a bit more precise than that. We all know that dinosaur means terrible lizard or something close, but from the start it was appreciated that there was great variety amongst the dinosaur fossils being dug up, and so they were classified by physical characteristics. As more fossils were unearthed, with more bone detail available for examination, the cladistic classifications were modified to better reflect shared physical traits. This is how science works. It seeks always to reduce errors and pursue the facts towards true statements which describe the physical world. Contrast this with religion, which claims that the truth was known 6,000 years ago and will accept no evidence which contradicts the words written down on goat skin hundreds of years before Pythagoras had even invented the triangle. If you are still not clear on how cladistics worked, I can do no better than offer you this clip from Aaron Ra's 10th foundational falsehood of creationism. And please watch the whole series, and especially his very recent Pterosaurs are terrible lizards, if you've not already done so.
Here another division occurs, this time determined by the number of holes appearing in a particular place in the structure of the skull. On the one hand we have synapsids with one temporal fenestra. On the other hand we have what are traditionally known as reptiles, starting with anapsids that have no temporal fenestra, and diapsids which have two. That line can be shown to divide between Leptosaurs on one side, which divide into plesiosaurs and other things including lizards, which also divided into many different subgroups including snakes. The archosaurs on the other side also divide into crocodilians, phytosaurs, pterosaurs, and dinosaurs, which themselves divide again and eventually include a subset we now know as birds.
Just because you're in the same class as a chimpanzee does not make you a chimpanzee any more than being a mammal makes you a whale. This classification system is a man-made system for classifying life into categories for simple study. It has nothing to do with whether or not they evolved from one another or a common ancestor.
Stupid boy. Cladistics is based on common traits which indicate common ancestry. The fossil record provides ample evidence of primitive forms, and there is not a single example of any creature, living or extinct, ever contradicting the expected evolution of morphology. Aaron once again says it best.
If they were all specially created, one might think that any one of them could develop by some other means or in some other order. Maybe snails would develop like mammals and fish develop like squids, something like that. Something that wouldn't only indicate an inherited trait consistent with both the genetics and morphology of common ancestry. But instead, every vertebrate has red blood, while chelicerates and mollusks all have blue blood, with no exceptions on either side. Everything we see in nature consistently adheres to everything we would expect of a chain of inherited variations carried down through flowering lines of descent, just as it is in this case too.
It is alleged that dinosaurs evolved into birds.
No, Ian. We know they had a common ancestry. You know that as well. Your carefully scripted video is specifically designed to mislead your ignorant creationist audience.
Now, if, as Norell, Novosek, and many others claim,
not many others claim, Ian. Let's talk some numbers. In 1987, it was estimated that 700 scientists in the US out of 480,000 gave any credence to creation science. A 1991 Gallup poll indicated 5% of US scientists, including those in a non-biological field, identified as creationists. In 2005, 70,000 Australian scientists and science teachers stated that intelligent design fails to qualify on every count as a scientific theory. A 2009 Pew poll found that 97% of US scientists said that evolution was fact. However, only 32% of the general public understood that fact. Your video, Ian, is aimed at the ignorant 68% of the US public. It's not educating them, it is harming them and their children's education, and I suspect in the long term, the US economy.
That birds evolved from the theropod dinosaurs, then we would expect to see a progression through the fossil record of dinosaurs evolving into birds with numerous intermediate fossils.
Transitional forms in the fossil record are ones which show distinct traits both of the ancestor but also the descendant group. Donald Prothero, who you may have seen on Mr. Deity and the Flood, is a paleontologist and geologist currently at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, and in his 2007 book, Evolution, What the Fossils Say and Why It Matters, he states that the number of species known from the fossil record was less than 5% of the number of known living species, and that this would suggest that we only currently know about far less than 1% of all the species that ever lived. Because fossilization is a rare process, but we do have transitional forms in the fossil record. The evolution of the cetaceans is especially well documented in the fossil record, and as always, genetics backs up the fossil record and confirms evolutionary theory. Ask a creationist which creature they would expect to be most closely related to a whale. Evolutionary theory suggests that it would be a land mammal, and with a little imagination you will reach the right conclusion. It is a genetic fact that the hippopotamus is the closest genetic link to the whale. Here we have a big pig that spends most of its life in water. We don't need transitional fossils. The hippo is a transitional form, as of course is every living thing, because evolution is a continual process.
Finding bird fossils older than the theropod dinosaurs would show that birds were around before those dinosaurs, and thus could not have evolved from them.
Stupid boy. No one but creationists constructing a straw man claim that they did. Birds evolved among the theropods, not from them, in the same way that humans evolved among the great apes and not from gorillas or chimps.
And thus we have another finding this past week from Australia of fossil bird tracks in rocks which contain theropod dinosaur tracks.
Which should surprise no one who knows that birds have been around for over 160 million years and that the big dinos did not die out until around 65 million years ago.
Now obviously the birds were around in very modern form.
Very modern form. Let's remember that.
In fact, the tracks were described as matching those of the egret, and in fact the tracks showed the skid marks of a bird coming in for a landing.
So there were just tracks found, and from that you, Ian, think it's reasonable to state to your audience that this was a bird of very modern form. It would be accurate to say that the bird had feet similar to a modern egret or heron, and again that would surprise no one who keeps up to date And though these 105 million year old tracks are the oldest so far found in Australia, we have had tracks dated to over 140 million years ago from China. Again, not surprising when we know that birds evolved at least 160 million years ago. And you know all this, Ian. You could not have researched your video with the detail you have and avoided seeing the same evidence that fell out of Google onto my lap. The fact that you choose to present what you do is what we call propaganda, Ian. Your words come back to peck you on the nose.
You cannot have complex, completely modern birds around before the Velociraptor, which was supposedly evolving into birds.
I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but that's how creationists work. The Velociraptor evolving into a bird is a creationist straw man. Let me put some meat on these fossil bones. Velociraptor fossils have been dated to around 75-71 million years ago. Forget Jurassic Park. It's now thought that velociraptors had feathers. They also had wishbones, nests of eggs, and hollow bones, just like modern birds. This does not mean that velociraptors evolved into birds, it means that the velociraptors were on the same evolutionary branch as those theropods which were birds. The apes are on the same evolutionary branch as us, but this does not mean they are evolving into humans. Archaeopteryx, we all know and love, predates Velociraptor by 75 million years, which suggests that flight amongst the dinosaurs, not pterosaurs or pterodactyls, predates Velociraptor by a biblical day or two. The physical similarity between dinosaurs and modern birds had been an issue of hot debate for 150 years when, in the 1990s, China began delivering fossil after fossil from Liaoning. The Liaoning beds were formed not by Noah's flood, but by volcanic action around 124 million years ago. The Liaoning beds are teeming with fossils of every kind: lizards, turtles, mammals, fish, frogs, and dinosaurs with feathers. So we now know that our feathered friends have been around a while. What about Juby's very modern form footprint? Well, of course, it is just that, a footprint. You cannot construct a bird from a footprint. But we do know that Ornithurae, bird tails, were around 120 million years ago, and Enantiomorphs, opposite birds, were around 129 million years ago. I shall put links in the description for you to peruse. The fossil record, especially from China since the 1990s, proves that animals achieved flight long, long ago. Let's look at one more piece of bird crap from this week's offering.
Proto Avis was found in the Texas Triassics near Post, Texas. Now, to the unbiased eye, the Proto Avis bones sure look like the modern-day blackbird.
If your modern-day blackbird is 14 inches tall, nocturnal, and has teeth.
Again, if completely modern birds were around long before any of the supposed half-dinosaur, half-birds, how could birds have evolved from dinosaurs?
Completely modern birds. Again, Ian, those who support Proto Avis as a 220 million year old bird claim it had teeth, was nocturnal or crepuscular, and present no evidence that it even had feathers. So, some blackbird. Those who dispute Proto Avis classification have highlighted numerous problems with the fossil, not limited to the fact that it's actually a chimera made up of fragments of various fossils which happened to wash up in the same place and were then fossilized. Again, I'm not saying Proto Avis is not a bird which predates Archaeopteryx by 75 million years. I'm saying that it is far from being widely accepted as a valid fossil. And Juby completely failing to give any hint of the controversy to his audience is dishonesty of the highest caliber. If future fossil finds do push the origin of birds back 75 million years to 220 million years ago, it would be fascinating, but would do nothing to damage the facts of evolution. Mammals have been around at least 200 million years, and theropod dinosaurs for at least 231 million years. Coelosauria, the branch of theropods which includes the ancestors of modern birds, is currently dated to around 160 million years ago. If the textbooks need updating to reflect new evidence, that's what would happen. Wouldn't it be great if the Bible worked that way? As I approach 7,000 subscribers, please let me thank you all, once again, old and young, old and new, for your continued support.